Okay, so as I said, officially the Congress of Vienna will not be on our Unit 2 test. It will be on Unit 3, but I think it's important to also end Napoleon with, of course, the Congress of Vienna. So you're going to hear me talk about the Congress of Vienna again. Now we have part 3 of this lecture, and this is the Latin American revolutions. So this class, AP Euro, it's not just about European history. We cover so much more than that. And here's an example. Knowing these revolutions that occur at around the same time as either the French Revolution or during Napoleon's reign and just after Napoleon's reign, it's critical for the development of world history, development of these countries we're going to talk about, and of course, a good contextualization for our course. And even the AP exam likes to ask questions about the Latin American Revolution. They love Toussaint Louverture, so make sure you have this stuff down. All right, so here we will have a glimpse of how various Latin American countries become independent. So first, what actually is Latin America? Well, Latin America is basically South America, Central America, the Caribbean, these parts of the world that were colonized by the Spanish, the Portuguese, and other Latin-based languages. So the Spanish controlled a good portion of South America, Central America, the Caribbean, some parts of North America, like Florida. The Portuguese control Brazil. And then, of course, we know the British, French, and the Dutch have smaller sections of the Caribbean, of Central America, some parts of North America. So, some terms that we should be familiar with are how the Latin American colonies were governed by really the Spanish and the Portuguese. So this is actually leads us to the Latin American hierarchy, social hierarchy. So think of all the social hierarchies you covered in Global One last year. So the Latin American hierarchy, we're just going to really cover two aspects of it for now. But at the very top of the pyramid were the peninsulares, and these were people living in Latin America, but actually born in Spain or Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula. So they, of course, have some kids. Say you have one peninsular, marry another peninsular. Well, they make kids in Latin America, and those kids are going to be called Creoles. So they are born in Latin America, but they were the direct descendants of really Iberian Europeans, so either Spanish or Portuguese. So beyond that, there's going to be, especially with the importation of enslaved people from West Africa, there's going to be a very complicated system of racial hierarchy in Latin America, especially once we're seeing a mix of races between enslaved Africans, indigenous peoples, plus these Europeans. All right, so why, of course, was Europe there? We know it. Gold, silver, God, glory, gold. How did Europeans, really the Spanish and the Portuguese, control their pieces of land? So they used something called the encomienda system, their plantation system, that was predominantly used on sugar plantations, coffee, cocoa, tobacco, but sugar cane was the most profitable of these cash crops. And eventually, because 90% of indigenous people will be killed because of European contact, Europeans will start importing enslaved people from predominantly West Africa, and that will really begin a system of horrific abuse. Or not begin, I mean, it was happening with the indigenous people anyway, but this will further subjugate West African people. All right, next. So a key idea to know is, why do Latin American nations revolt against their Spanish colonizers, the Portuguese colonizers, the French colonizers? And it's going to be multifaceted, but one of the underlying common denominators are these legacies: the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, Napoleon. So think about the Enlightenment. Very similar reasons to its connection to the French Revolution. You have people like John Locke who say you have inalienable rights, life, liberty, property. So ideas of John Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, they are going to be read by the revolutionaries in Latin America. Toussaint Louverture in Haiti, he was taught how to read and write. He was reading John Locke. The Creoles, who are going to be largely responsible for the independence of other areas of Latin America, they were devout followers of the Enlightenment. So again, we see that clear connection, the Enlightenment to further revolution. Same thing with the American Revolution. The American Revolution served as an example that the Western Hemisphere can, in fact, rebel against their colonial occupiers. Same thing with the French Revolution. The French successfully overthrew their own regime. They're going to use the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and that connects to their own version of nationalism. The idea of Mexican nationalism, the idea of South American nationalism, Peruvian, Bolivian, Venezuelan, Haitian nationalism. It's all connected to previous examples of nationalism, like the French Revolution, like the American Revolution. Don't forget about this one. When Napoleon is taking over a good portion of Europe, these countries like Spain, like Portugal, they have bigger fish to fry than just worrying about their colonial holdings. So now Latin American independence leaders see their opening. They can take advantage of Napoleon's conquering of Europe to become independent of their former colonizers. All right, example number 1, and it's probably the most important example. Put a star on the Haitian Revolution and its leader, Toussaint Louverture. So Louverture, he was a former slave, and he actually had an owner who taught him how to read and write. And eventually he freed Toussaint. And Toussaint is going to go about Haiti, which at that point was called Saint-Domingue, and start organizing different groups of enslaved people and then eventually create a unified fighting force. And this is huge. So before I get to that, I just want to give a little bit of context. So the French considered their colony of Saint-Domingue their most profitable colony because Haiti is the center of the sugar trade, the sugar cane production in the Caribbean. So additionally, we know Haiti today is on the eastern side of Haiti is, of course, the Dominican Republic, which at that point was a colony of Spain. So what's actually really confusing about the Haitian Revolution is the players of the Spanish, the French, and the British are all have their hands in the Haitian Revolution in some facet. It just depends on the year we're talking about. Haitian Revolution is enormously complicated. So just doing it in a slide, I'm just trying to give you an overview here, but it's a fascinating revolution to study. So again, here's what Louverture has to do. He needs to organize, unify, and create a legitimate fighting force of former enslaved people. So he goes plantation to plantation and frees these slaves. And he now has to take slaves who have never, and former enslaved people who have never held a musket in their life, because they weren't allowed to, who are by and large illiterate because it was illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. So he needs to make them into a fighting force, and he does. That's so difficult. So Louverture is going to start this rebellion against the French. It gets further complicated in 1794 because now the French then abolished slavery in their entire empire. Remember how the National Convention, Robespierre, abolished slavery? Well, they're kind of done. They had nothing to do. This is where it gets complicated. Now the Spanish and the British, who do not at this point have an interest in outlawing slavery, they are going to try and take over Haiti. So now actually Toussaint Louverture went back on the French side and started fighting back for the French. And then the problem occurred was when Napoleon took over France in 1799. Napoleon tried to reinstall enslavement in Haiti. So yet again, the Haitian Revolution starts up again by 1799. So Louverture starts his revolt against the French yet again. So here, Louverture has a different tactic. He is now going to use both his well-trained military and the topography and climate of Haiti to his advantage. He's going to retreat into the mountainside of Haiti and, by and large, let yellow fever and malaria kill Napoleon's troops. So eventually, Napoleon is going to kind of pull one over Toussaint here. He's going to invite Toussaint to negotiate, and it was totally misleading. So they actually capture Toussaint when he thought he was just there to negotiate some things. Capture Toussaint, send him back to France. Toussaint Louverture will die in prison, but his subordinates will continue the revolution. His most important subordinate being called Dessalines. And eventually, because of a combination of the well-trained Haitian military and, of course, the destruction wreaked upon by French troops by yellow fever and malaria, France will pull their troops out, and Haiti becomes officially the very first truly free republic in the Western Hemisphere. Yes, please note what I just said. Truly free republic in the Western Hemisphere. I include that with the United States because the United States still had slavery at this point in time. Haiti will officially abolish slavery. They will create a constitution that was mostly written by Toussaint, based on enlightened ideals of equality. So, Haiti goes down as largely the first successful slave revolt in human history because they got a truly free country by 1804. All right, so here we're going to go through the next part of Latin American revolutions pretty quickly. You really just got to know name associations more than anything, but some decent stuff to know. Anywho, so again, what I wanted to note are who are these independence leaders? They, by and large, really the exception was Toussaint Louverture, because he was a former enslaved person. The people leading the Latin American revolutions were Creoles. Again, they were not born in Europe, but they were born to Spanish or Portuguese parents. So the person who's going to be responsible for fighting for independence against Spain for like the northern part of South America, so really Venezuela, Colombia, is going to be Simón Bolívar, known as the Liberator. And eventually he does, of course, liberate Venezuela, other parts of northern South America. He will also ally himself with José de San Martín to drive the Spanish out of Peru. But what's kind of neat is he created this country called Gran Colombia, which today makes up Venezuela, Colombia, Bolivia, and it actually did exist for a few years, but the problem was he tried to unify groups of people who were culturally different. And so Gran Colombia will cease to exist pretty shortly after his death. But still, it was a valiant attempt nonetheless to create a pretty large state in northern South America. All right, next on the list of Latin American revolutions is Argentina. So Argentina was led by a Creole named José de San Martín, who will unify the nationalistic forces in Argentina and push off the Spanish. Next, let's look at Mexico quickly. Miguel Hidalgo. So Hidalgo is kind of interesting because, yes, he was a Creole, but he was actually a priest. And think of the context there. Being a priest, he just a priest. We're not talking bishop. We're not talking cardinal. Just a lowly priest. And he really saw the suffering of the Mexican people from the Spanish. So what he will do is he will essentially organize the nationalistic forces against the Spanish. And what he did was he had a pretty famous moment. So he climbed to the top of his church bell tower and rang the bells. It's called the Grito de Dolores, the cry of Dolores, where he starts as, we need to begin the revolution now, and then they go on and start purging the Spanish nobility from Mexico, and eventually the Spanish actually capture Hidalgo, execute him. They initially stop the revolt, but the other leaders of the Mexican Revolution will continue the revolution, eventually make Mexico an independent country from Spain in 1821. All right. And lastly, so here I just want to really introduce a vocabulary word. So Chile will be led by... the independence of Chile will be led by a Creole named Bernardo O'Higgins, and after he does lead Chile to independence, he creates this position called caudillo, military dictator. And this is important because what's going to happen with these countries in Latin America that become independent is many of them will fall into a series of military dictatorships, and by and large, they named the person who was in charge the caudillo. So just be familiar with that term because it will pop up a few times in world history, especially after we're done with the AP Euro exam and we start teaching more global specific content. So we're going to see this term come up a bit. How about Brazil? This is kind of an interesting piece of history. So when Napoleon took over the Iberian Peninsula, the House of Braganza, so the entire Portuguese royal family, fled Portugal and went to Brazil. And after Napoleon is kicked out of power, most of the Portuguese royal family went back to Portugal and became, king again. Well, the son of the Portuguese king, who was John VI, is going to stay in Brazil and actually rebel against his father. And he will eventually become the first king of Brazil as Pedro I. So I kind of like that idea. His father goes back to Portugal, Pedro stays, and he really starts the revolution against Portugal. And Brazil will be a monarchy until the very end of the 19th century when they are when they actually create a republic. So that's the general timeline of Brazilian history for you. All right, so thank you for listening to that very chunky lecture. I know it was a lot, but at least you can always go back, rewind, and listen to some other things you didn't quite understand. So thanks for listening. Have a good day.